We all like to think the people in charge of our countries have their heads screwed on straight, but the truth is they can be just as stupid as the rest of us. In fact, they can be way more stupid. From political punch-ups and selling nuke material to anyone who asks, to state-mandated glowing reindeer. Sounds too dumb to be real, right? Well, get ready to hear some of the stupidest decisions that our many governments and official institutions have ever made. NASCAR soldiers. The U.S. National Guard are always on the lookout for strapping young go-getters to join their ranks. They were so eager for new recruits, the National Guard partnered with NASCAR in 2011, plastering their iconography all over the cars and sponsoring major events. It certainly made sense. After all, high-octane NASCAR races were pulling in up to 15.6 million viewers at the time. Over a 3-year period, the National Guard reportedly spent a phenomenal $88 million of taxpayer money on its sponsorship deal with NASCAR. And the advertising paid off, too. In 2012 alone, the Guard received 24,800 applicants through the sponsorship. Wow, that's pretty good, especially considering their yearly recruitment goal is only 50,000 new signups. But the National Guard hadn't really thought this partnership through. Of the 24,800 applications, only 20 met the National Guard's requirements. And of those 20, none ended up actually joining. While the National Guard never explained exactly why so few of these applicants weren't eligible to serve, I think I've found the answer. Though data for 2012 isn't available, according to Statista, the average age for a NASCAR viewer in 2016 was 58. This means the National Guard spent $88 million tax dollars targeting people who were, on average, 23 years older than their maximum sign-up age of 35. It looks like this recruitment logic hit a dead end. Canada shreds. Oh, Canada. The country known for hockey, maple syrup, and accidentally charging random people millions of dollars. The tourism board can't be thrilled about that last one. You see, Irvin LaRoe and his wife, Jill Moore, ran a fairly successful RV park in British Columbia. In 1996, LaRoe's business underwent a routine audit by the Canada Revenue Agency, or CRA for short, when a slight hiccup occurred. Instead of putting all LaRoe's receipts and important documents in a folder, they put them directly into a shredder. Easy mistake to make, right? Folder, shredder, they're just so similar. To make matters worse, the CRA simply refused to own up to its mistake or give LaRoe the benefit of the doubt. As they'd shredded all his receipts and expenses, it now appeared that LaRoe and his wife owed the government a staggering 640,000 Canadian dollars, which after interest was closer to a $1 million bill. This was an obscene amount of money to pay for someone else's mistake, so the two took the issue to court. In 2005, after spending hundreds of thousands of tax dollars in legal costs to try and save face, the CRA reluctantly gave up the legal battle and nullified the debt. Unfortunately, going to court is expensive and often triggers other costly side effects. In the years between the mistake being made and rectified, LaRoe's main creditor demanded he paid back his loans. LaRoe reportedly had to sell both his businesses and his home, and in the end was left with basically nothing. Oh, and in the meantime, it was established that the CRA actually owed LaRoe $24,000. The nerve! Have you ever been the victim of a stupid government screw-up like this? It can feel cathartic to vent, so let me know down in the comments. And while you're at it, be sure to like and subscribe for more incredible content every day. Alright, what dumb government decision is next? Jingle All the Way. Bioluminescence is an amazing natural phenomenon. There are hundreds of animals around the world that sparkle, shine, and glow in truly amazing ways. Most of these creatures are small, like fish or bugs. But these are reindeer. No, this isn't some kind of reindeer glowworm hybrid. It's just a regular old deer photographed in Finland. Those antlers aren't even really glowing, they're just coated in reflective paint. The big idea behind this crazy-looking concept came from the Finnish government. Around 4,000 reindeer are killed in traffic collisions across the country each year, which really hurts the revenue of reindeer farms. Additionally, these collisions cause a lot of damage to the cars involved. An adult reindeer can weigh as much as a grand piano after all. So, to make them more visible at night, the government figured coating the reindeer's antlers in a reflective paint would do the trick. Unfortunately, this blinding solution failed. It turned out drivers often mistook the reflectors for people in the dark and assumed they wouldn't run into the middle of the road when they saw car headlights approaching. Big mistake. Even if it had worked, though, the government ignored the fact that reindeer lose their antlers in the winter, aka the darkest season of the year. Could someone give Rudolph a call? Maybe he could give the Finnish government some pointers. Dead wrong. What's the worst thing you've ever done to get out of an embarrassing situation? Well, you probably didn't go as far as this next government official. Jaime Rolando Urbina Torres was the mayor of Tantara, a small town in Peru. During the height of the COVID pandemic, he decided it would be a good idea to ignore lockdown rules and go out drinking with his buddies. But when the police came to enforce curfew, he wanted to avoid a scene. So, like the brave leader he was, he decided to play dead in an actual coffin. And this fooled the police for all of 10 seconds, who brought Torres to the station shortly after. On the whole, I think pretending to be dead and hiding in a coffin ranks below a dog ate my homework on the believability scale. Land of the landlords. Today, the Vietnam War is remembered as a historic waste of time, money, and lives. But way back in 1961, it was seen as just a regular waste of time, money, and lives. At this point in the Vietnam War, the Americans, allied with South Vietnam against the Viet Cong in the north, were eager to make themselves look better than their opponents. This is where the Strategic Hamlet program came into play. The idea was to create several small, safe villages in South Vietnam that peasants could be relocated to and hopefully come to appreciate American values. Spoiler alert, this did not happen. For starters, people generally don't like being forcefully relocated. The South Vietnamese especially hated it. History and heritage were huge parts of their culture, and for many villagers, it was agonizing to have to leave the land their families had worked for generations, as well as their family graves. At least the hamlets were nice though, right? Oh, buddy. Many of the hamlets were in awful, barren locations that couldn't be farmed and had no trees to provide shade. To make matters worse, many of these hamlets were overcrowded. Some reports indicate that hamlets initially built to house 6,000 people ended up housing 14,000. Imagine this. It's 90 degrees Fahrenheit, you're starving, crammed next to 14,000 people you don't know, and they didn't even think to put up an umbrella for some shade. How would you like living there? It shouldn't be all too surprising then that when the Viet Cong showed up, hamlet residents didn't feel like fighting to the death to defend these places. In fact, the Viet Cong often used the hamlets as recruitment zones for new Viet Cong soldiers. By 1963, the South controlled just 20% of the hamlets they constructed. Gee, who could have possibly predicted that forcibly relocating people from the places they love would end badly, huh? The Pigeon Platoon. If you're in a major metropolitan area, chances are you're familiar with these guys. Pigeons are as much a part of city life as smog, traffic, and tiny, overpriced apartments. But what if these flying pests could be utilized for the greater good? Well, that's the same thought that China's People Liberation Army had in 2020, when they purchased a whopping 10,000-unit pigeon army. The rationale is that the Chinese military needs a way to send messages should all the other means of communication go out. This means these pigeons will prove invaluable if the Chinese army find themselves unable to use the phone, the radio, email, fax, pagers, text, instant messaging, Morse code, or Habbo Hotel. But China might just be taking a leaf out of Russia's book. In 2013, Russia's Guard Service reportedly began a project to revert document keeping to typewriters and paper after major online document leaks. Maybe the two countries are planning to rehash World War I together? All I know is, I pity the Chinese soldiers stuck with cleanup duty in the pigeon room. Russia bans being emo. If you were a teenager in the early 2000s, there's a good chance you went through an emo phase. You know, dark hair, grim outlook on life, embarrassing music. None of us are particularly proud of it. But at the end of the day, it was just a harmless phase, right? Well, not according to the Russian government. In June of 2008, Russia held a hearing on a bill that sought to lessen the influence of this supposedly dangerous teen trend. The bill, memorably titled "The Government Strategy in the Sphere of Spiritual and Ethical Education," sought to ban emo and goth fashion from schools and government buildings, as well as regulating emo websites. Their reasoning was that the emo lifestyle promoted self-harm, and they wanted to stop teens entertaining the thought of taking their own lives. One of the writers of the bill said that the point was to make sure that by 2020, Moscow will have someone to rule its government. Just how many kids did Russia think it was losing to this emo endemic? But there was one pretty big, obvious problem with the bill. There's no better way to make something seem cool to a bunch of teenagers than the government telling them not to do it. On July 19th, a veritable black parade of emos marched through the city of Krasnoyarsk to protest the bill. In addition to negative attention the bill received, there was another problem. How do you tell someone's emo? Just by the way they dress? Is a goth emo? Is a scene kid? What about a hipster? If all those subcultures don't mean anything to you then, well, congratulations for being part of a much less embarrassing generation than I am. But seriously, how do you legislate subcultures? The bill was doomed from the start. It was never passed into general law, and the emo kids were free to carry on. South Korean standoff. Have you ever had an annoying coworker you just hated? Someone so incompetent and irritating you've wanted to smack them upside the head? Well, imagine that coworker was the former Prime Minister of South Korea. Still tempted? As it turns out, a lot of people were. In 2019, a total of 29 politicians were charged over a mass brawl that took place at the country's National Assembly. And if you think this was a brief little pushing session, think again. The incident saw lawmaker Choi Yi-bae and 4 of his aides trapped in his office for 6 hours after members of the Liberty Korea Party barricaded his door shut with a sofa. The beef was apparently over a new bill that would reform South Korea's voting system, giving smaller parties more of a say. Or, in other words, it would give larger parties like Liberty Korea less of a say. It was not a good look for Liberty Korea, especially after their previous leader and president of South Korea was impeached in 2017 due to corruption and her connections to a cult. Hire a PR team, guys. The entire event culminated in a massive punch-up, with Liberty Korea being so humiliated they were forced to merge with several smaller parties to remain relevant. Word has it the National Assembly will be convening next week to officially vote on Wet Willies, Purple Nurples, and Swirlies. Elephant in the room. Elephants are truly incredible animals. They're strong, intelligent, live a long time, and have great memories. The U.S. Army looked at these facts and came to one obvious conclusion: that these animals should be on the bomb squad? Yep. In 2015, the U.S. Army partnered with the South African Reserve to determine whether elephants would make for effective bomb-sniffing animals. While it's true that elephants do have a great sense of smell, and that dogs and rats have been used to sniff out bombs in the past, there's one important difference between these animals. African elephants can weigh up to 7 tons. That's heavier than 5 cars. Would you want something that size lumbering around an airport or a minefield? Imagine how short the Hurt Locker would have been if Jeremy Renner weighed as much as 5 cars. According to the Army themselves, The purpose of funding this strange endeavor is less about sending pachyderm bomb disposal units into the field and more about trying to figure out how elephants can sniff bombs out so effectively. Personally, I think this proves that if you want your research to get funded, convince the US military they can weaponize it. Who's the boss? In August of 2002, a series of tragic accidents caused the I-40 bridge in Oklahoma to collapse. Before long, the FBI arrived on the scene, eager to help those in need as well as figure out what caused the accident. Taking charge was an assertive Army captain, Captain William James Clark. He gave the FBI orders, telling them where to go and what to do, as well as commandeering supplies from local stores for a relief effort. This would have been quite noble if it weren't completely bunk. William James Clark wasn't an Army captain at all. He was just some guy in a cheap camo costume. You'd think trying to get away with this under the watchful eyes of the FBI would be the dumbest move in history, but it was the FBI that really messed up. During his roleplay session, Clark reportedly picked up $400 worth of groceries and racked up a $900 bill at a local hotel, stating the Army would pay for both, and the FBI didn't suspect a thing. He later stole a pickup truck and made a beeline for Canada before being apprehended by the Canadian Mounties. The real kicker here is this wouldn't be the last time this would happen. Clark went on to use fraudulent checks all across Alaska under the guise of being an Army captain. Well, if this story makes you wonder just how gullible the FBI can be, leave the door open. If I asked you to rob the FBI, you'd think I was crazy, right? This is a government agency with near limitless resources, top-of-the-line security systems, and enough muscle to make anyone nervous. Well, it turns out you're probably overthinking things. You can just ask the FBI if you can rob them. That's basically what a group of anti-war activists did in 1971. After failing to pick the locks on an FBI office in Media, Pennsylvania, they had an idea that was equal parts brilliant and stupid. They just politely asked. Several hours before burglarizing the offices, the group left a note on the previously locked doors that simply read, "Please don't lock this door tonight." This turned out to be an idea that was just stupid enough to work. Sure enough, a member of the FBI very politely left the door unlocked later that night. Seriously, all it took was a single note to give these activists unlimited access to secret and confidential documents. What are my tax dollars even paying for at this point? Sticky notes? The activists were so astonished at how easy it all was, they initially thought they should leave another note saying thank you, but they decided against it. Well, after that catastrophic fail, I'd have been tempted to leave them an entire fruit basket. UK, hun? If there's one thing the British love, it's being absolute sticklers for inane and stupid rules. What you're looking at right now is a keep off the grass sign, nobly and boldly protecting a patch of grass that is only about 2 by 3 feet. If this image isn't awkward and embarrassing enough for you, here's a wider shot. Ugh. Now, this image may look stupid, but trust me, context only makes it stupider. This road is in Rains Park, London, which was in the process of going through £70 million worth of spending cuts, or roughly $100 million, at the time this picture was taken. Somewhere between not filling potholes, demolishing public libraries, and closing down puppy orphanages, some miserable bureaucrats saw the country's last happy child run across a tiny patch of grass and thought, not in my England. To be fair, it might have been a super important patch of grass, but I doubt it. Highly. Have you ever seen a sign this pointless? Hey, let me know down in the comments. Time trouble in China. China is a great big place, about 3,250 miles east to west and 3,500 miles north to south, giving it a total area of around 3.7 million square miles. For scale, that's big enough that you could snugly fit all of India, Japan, Kenya, the UK, Italy, Poland, and South Korea within its borders, while still having enough room for plenty of tinier nations like Costa Rica or the Maldives. It's weird then that a country so huge has exactly one time zone. America, by contrast, is slightly smaller than China at 3.6 million square miles, but the mainland US has 4 different time zones, with Alaska and Hawaii each on their own. If America were on a single time zone, it might mean that if the sun set around 9 p.m. in one part of the country, it wouldn't set until after midnight in others. It also means that in some areas the sun wouldn't rise until 11 a.m. So why on earth does China live like this? Well, it's because in 1949, the ruler of the People's Republic of China, Mao Zedong, attempted to project strength and unity across the nation by declaring that from that point on, China would operate on one shared time, Beijing time. What this essentially means is the further you live from Beijing, the stranger time is for you, because the government says so. In Urumqi, for example, it's not unusual for residents to eat dinner after midnight. In some areas of China, the time of day is so irrelevant it isn't even used on bus timetables. Top-notch decision there, Mao. One nuclear bomb, please. The Government Accountability Office, or GAO for short, is the agency in the United States that makes sure all the other U.S. government agencies are acting responsibly and doing their jobs correctly. So, if you've been paying attention, you'll realize they basically have one of the hardest jobs on Earth. Well, in 2007, someone at the GAO asked the question, hey, how easy is it to build a nuclear bomb? I mean, seeing how dangerous those things are, it should be practically impossible for anyone to get a hold of all the necessary materials without a super thorough background check, right? Right? Well, it turns out the GAO set up a fake company and applied for a license to buy nuclear materials, and to their shock, the Nuclear Regulatory Committee gave them one. Just like that. If they had done even the tiniest amount of research, they would have discovered the company didn't exist and that it had no offices or employees. It gets worse, though. The GAO discovered that with just a little tweaking, they were able to edit their license so they could remove the limit on the amount of nuclear material they could buy. More than enough to destroy a city block, at the very least. Bomb-sniffing elephant grants, government secrets, nuclear material. Is there anything the US government won't give you if you just ask? Florida Big Ban Hammer. Now we're traveling to one of my favorite places. Florida, the birthplace of Margaritaville, Gatorade, and the notorious Florida Man headlines. This particular Floridian fable takes us back to 2013, when the state decided it wanted to crack down on online gambling. In April of that year, Florida's Governor Rick Scott approved a ban on slot machines and internet cafes. However, there was a big problem with the bill signed into effect. The person who wrote it had clearly never used a computer before. You see, the bill didn't ban specific machines or the act of gambling itself. Instead, the bill banned any machine, device, system, or network of devices that may be used in games of chance where money can be wagered. Now, if you've spotted a problem with the wording here, congratulations on being more computer literate than any lawmaker in the state of Florida. When you think about it, every device with internet capabilities, from phones to gaming consoles to smart fridges, can be used to connect to the internet and wager money. Heck, if you had 2 tin cans with a string between them, that's technically a system or network of devices you could use to gamble. Florida essentially banned all devices with Wi-Fi, and depending on your reading of the bill, all forms of communication. It didn't take long for opponents of the bill to make this exact argument. One man who had his internet cafe closed down by the bill argued that if his business was shut down, it only made sense for Florida to shut down everything. Don't worry though, several lawmakers have argued the bill is fine as long as it's interpreted with common sense. Personally, I wouldn't sleep any easier at night knowing my rights were in the hands of Florida's idea of common sense. So there you have it. A small taster of some of the worst, stupidest, and most catastrophic government-led decisions in modern history. Can you think of any massive blunders or political slip-ups I've missed? Let me know down in the comments, and thanks for watching.